this presentation actually looks at some of the values, views, and beliefs from some of our ethnic minority mothers around the issue of overweight and obesity in Lambeth. Lambeth, we are in Lambeth, in the borough of Lambeth here, but like many inner city areas in London, we have high proportion of different ethnic minority groups. And whenever I say ethnic minority groups, I remind myself that in many of our schools, Black Afro-Caribbean and Black African children form the majority. So it's a term that we use nationally, but again, it highlights that for some areas in London, it's not a minority group. Right, so the areas that we focus on: Black Caribbean, Black West African, White British, routine and manual class, Somali and Portuguese families. The main aim was really to understand and to really look at what some of the attitudes and beliefs were around overweight and obesity, and to understand how that knowledge and awareness of healthy eating and physical activity, and also to give us an insight into some of the behavioral choices in relation to these two issues, as well as identify some of the barriers that the communities were expressing. So one of the first learning was that very few of our communities view overweight and obesity in relation to BMI. I know that I think most people understand BMI. I'm mindful that not everybody is coming from a health background. Anybody not familiar with BMI? Right, okay, so although we use it generally, it's the way we measure obesity and overweight. Very few of our communities viewed their weight in relation to this measurement. Most looked at it in terms of how they saw themselves, what it looked like visually, and also in terms of functional terms. And when that was explored a bit more, what we found is that it was viewed really at the very extreme scale. So some of those cases that you saw on television around someone that was extremely morbidly overweight, that wasn't able to move any longer, that was really where they were viewing being overweight and obese. Right, so it's taken a little bit of time, but that was some of what was being said to us. So for a Black Caribbean, it says, I think from size 18 upwards is overweight. White mothers were saying overweight is when you can't fit into proper clothes and you have to wear those great big tent-like things. Also, I think obese person is when one of them people can't get out of bed or off their chair, you know, when their legs is full of rolls of fat. So I think for many of us, we would see this as extreme, but that was really the perception. They're housebound, can't get out of bed and wash themselves, so they have to have somebody to clean them, and so on and so forth. Again, for a Somali mom, that was seen in relation to their physical ability to pray. So really someone that was already being impeded physically to move. For Portuguese, 5 kilos overweight, but 20 kilos over is obese. And I must say something about within the groups, our Portuguese community tend to be what we call nearly the outlier. So they had quite different perception from the other groups that we looked at. And so for the Portuguese community, it was mostly seen it in terms of 5 kilos overweight, then you need to do something about it. But again, it was 20 kilos to be obese. West African dismissed the concept of overweight, and there was quite a bit, nearly an annoyance really in terms of expressing how they felt when it was raised as an issue. And I think mainly because it was perceived as different culturally in terms of, for our community, this is the size we like to be, and this is how we think, you know, this is mostly related to being okay, being healthy, and that some of the measurement used by either the health system was nearly seen as something that was taken from a white middle class standard and not from where they were coming from in terms of their community and the acceptability within the community. So that some of what was fed back highlights some of how they viewed it as different. And there it gets cut off a bit. Yeah. So with the Black Caribbean, she said, I thought I was overweight, but when my doctor told me I'm obese, I thought, no, and I'm reading the wrong one. I'm sorry about that. All right. Overweight is when I can't fit in. Right, I'm not going to, I am also not reading the right one. So in any event, just really highlighting again some of the difference between the feedback from the Portuguese community. So there it is. So it says, I thought I was overweight, but when my doctor told me I am obese, I thought, oh my God, I didn't know that. I was shocked. I was like, oh my God, I am clinically obese. That feedback was from a Black Caribbean mother. And again, from one of the white mothers said, well, my doctor said I was clinically obese, I can't breathe, I can't wash myself, but apparently from my height, I've got too much weight, so I am obese, but I can move. So it still was kind of linking to, even if it's been highlighted by a medical profession, a lot of how the initial perception that they had was playing a role in terms of how they took on the message. When they were presented with a photograph and asked to identify what they view as the ideal body weight, as I mentioned, our Portuguese community, again, was a bit of the outlier there, and you could see that they have chosen at the far end in comparison to the others. And this is, so the Somali and white British, farther up the end, with their Black Caribbean even farther, and we can see with their West African community where they have identified what they would view as the ideal body weight. So when asked about perception of overweight and body size, again, we see our Portuguese community much farther that side of the line. Our West African mothers felt like the photograph presented there did not include what they would view as overweight. It had to be even farther back. So no one there was overweight in terms of the perceptions. we use a vignette to try and explore this further, and it was around, I would like you to picture in your mind a family with a father, mother, 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, aged between 5 and 10 years old. They live in Lambeth. They eat at least 5 fruits and vegetables a day as part of their diet, and everyone in the family does at least half an hour exercise every day. So that was presented to them as a hypothetical scenario and asked them to view themselves in that context. These were some of the findings. So all Somalis and West Africans felt the family would not be from their community. It had to be white and middle class. They so immediately said, "You're not talking about us, are you? It's not from our community." None again, except our outlier, the Portuguese community, thought that themselves would have such a lifestyle. And some of the reasons that we had, and I know many of us here would know this and have heard this before, but stressful life. Sarah talked about being really, really busy. It is very, very difficult to integrate some of these things. Very little time. Being unable to afford there was a very strong perception that eating healthily is very expensive. And we have found that with other insight work we've done, and that children would not like fruits and vegetables. So that's and again, once that was explored a bit further, a lot of that was really, in a way, logical way, because if you are on a budget and buying food that is seen will be thrown away, it's not an easy choice to make. So I think the preference is about buying what I know they will eat, and then money is not wasted. So therefore, the routine and manual British, again, they did not identify with that. I can't see the kids doing half an hour of exercise a day because they go to school. But I have never known a kid to eat 5 fruits of veg. I'm sorry. So that was response. Also, just go to that one. So Black Caribbean feedback was, for a Caribbean, I don't see that going on here. We Caribbean people love our meals. We tend to eat a lot of meat with carbohydrate like rice, yam, dumpling, bananas. If that's a black family, they have to have lived here for a very long time. And they have to be well off. For the feedback from the West African says, you're eating vegetable and you're working out, the kids are working out, these guys have got time. I have to go to work, the kids come back, what time do we have to do this routine of exercise and all? You look at this family and either the mom is white and the dad is African, because 99.9% of Africans don't do this. It says, I look at this family and they can't be Africans. So some of the barriers that were identified. So I can see the kids probably doing half an hour of exercise a day because they go to school, but I've never known a kid, and I'm repeating myself. All right. And again, feedback from the Somali, again, there was a lack of really identification with that hypothetical scene as with the others. As you can see from there, this family is raised in home that value healthy eating and exercise, and they just continue to do what they were taught in childhood. Somalis are not raised in that way and do not care about healthy eating or exercise. So they are not a poor white family either, because poor white people do not care about healthy eating, was feedback from the... And again, there's our outlier with the feedback from the Portuguese community. That's a good way to live if you have the time. So at least aspirationally, that was something that they thought would be a good, good thing to work towards. And again, we do find that there was a lot of preference for healthy eating within the Portuguese community. But there was an acknowledgement that the exercise would require a lot of time that they didn't have. When we looked at, when we asked about perceptions, body image of overweight, one of the findings that I guess we to some extent already knew is that for many of our communities, the children being seen as healthy is linked with a big child, and so that's a strong association with health. So having a big baby is seen as a good thing, and again, with the exception of our Portuguese community, that regarded large children and thin children as unhealthy children. Many believed that they would grow out of it, so and some parents were actually concerned about the children being underweight and not eating enough. And I guess someone gave an example early on around with the Turkish community, so that's interesting. And again, when they were asked to choose where a child would be seen as overweight, we can see the big difference between the different groups. So how did we use this? During the development of this insight work and others, we were in the process of developing a comprehensive healthy weight care pathway. And one of the areas that we were working on was really, in our way of viewing it, was making healthy weight everybody's business. And part of it was acknowledging that we have a big workforce that comes into contact with children and young families, and we needed to somehow ensure that everybody was aware of what we were trying to address in Lambeth around unhealthy weight. And so we had what we call the Lambeth Level 1 Multi-Agency Healthy Weight Training as part of the pathway package, and that was really around supporting those that come into contact with children and families to challenge the widespread misunderstanding around obesity, in particular association of overweight and obesity with morbid level of obesity. The sessions in itself, to date we have trained over 1,000 multi-agency staff, and it has provided a real insight into the need to ensure that if we are going to make unhealthy weight everybody's business, then we need to really ensure that our messages are consistent and that we are providing the right level of support to staff for them to address the issue. It is still seen as a quite sensitive issue, and interestingly, in the workshop that we provide, a big part of it is really discussing and exploring some of the practitioners' own views around overweight and obesity. And in a way, it really does make sense, because if it is not an issue for you as a health professional, then you might not want to raise it as well. And so that's been a real journey in terms of ensuring that the staff were given the information, the support, and the resources to enable them to address overweight and obesity with people they came into contact. So as I said, it's very much a bespoke training and had several different objectives, but in essence what it does, it ensures that they have up-to-date messages, that they are aware around some of the issues and they know where to signpost families and children that they come into contact with. Again, as I said, the Healthy Weight Care Pathway has not only the prevention arm of things, but it also has the weight management services. And we have a level 2 and level 3 weight management services. And we really needed people that come into contact with children and young family knew where to signpost. And that they were able to acknowledge lifestyle and cultural barriers. Really, I will end it there because it really was just to give you a flavor how we use that insight work to inform the Healthy Weight Care Pathway. Thank you.